Shalom. Today I want to share about an important prophecy found in the book of Isaiah in the Tanakh. First, please subscribe to my channel if you want to get more videos. Give us the thumbs up and hit the notification bell. This way you won't miss any of my further programs. So the prophecy I want to talk about is a Messianic prophecy found in Isaiah 7:14. Really, it's 7:1 through 17. It's about the virgin birth. It's very controversial. It's not that complicated, though. I'll read the two key verses, 13 and 14. Then he said, "Listen now, O house of David. Is it too slight a thing for you to try the patience of man, that you will try the patience of my God as well? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel." So let me give you a little bit of introduction here. In the context of the book of Isaiah, chapters 7 through 12 make a unit referred to as the book of Emmanuel. The name Emmanuel is found actually three times in that unit, in 7:14, 8:8, and 8:10. Also to be noted is the fact that children in the Bible were always given names that would reflect their character based on the thinking of their parents. So Emmanuel literally means with us God. So this coming one, described in Isaiah 7:14, will be God among us, God with us. Of all the Messianic prophecies, Isaiah 7:14 is probably the most controversial, as it is disputed between rabbis and evangelical theologians alike. As the passage talks about a sign that seems to be describing a short-term prophecy, but that is always applied to the birth of Messiah, which came 700 years after the prophecy. So which is it? It appears to be confusing. Also, the use of the word Alma to depict the virgin has caused much discussion. Some say it is a virgin. Some say the word describes a young, unmarried woman. Some even say that Alma does not necessarily describe a virgin at all. We'll look at that in a minute. Now, a close look at the passage will let us understand the meaning of the prophecy. See, at first glance, it appears contradictory, but in reality, there are two different prophecies given by Isaiah in the same passage, one short term and one long term. Two prophecies. That's the big difference. Additionally, a study of all other occurrences of the word Alma in the Tanakh will elucidate and validate its meaning beyond any shadow of a doubt. Let's talk for a minute about hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the science of interpretation and explanation of any text. Of course, hermeneutics applied to the Bible is the science of interpretation and explanation of biblical text. In an effort to make sense of Isaiah 7:13 and 14, which requires an immediate sign to King Jehaz to validate that the prophet is not a false prophet, many evangelicals have claimed that the prophecy was a good example of double fulfillment, meaning the prophecy might have more than one fulfillment at different times in history. I have a problem with that. Double fulfillment is not necessarily a biblical approach to prophecy. Rather, another principle known as double reference is being used here, I think. Double reference simply claims that one block of scripture dealing with one person, one event in time, may be followed by another block of scripture dealing with another person or event in time, without indicating anything in the text, any reason to believe that there is a gap of time, even though there is. Double reference, not double fulfillment. As we will see, Isaiah 7:13 through 17 contains two prophecies, not one. Two prophecies with different purposes as well as different fulfillment at different times, yet within the same passage. And two prophecies given to two different people or group of people. So let's talk about the word Alma for a second. Much has been written on the meaning of the Hebrew word Alma. In this passage, it is translated virgin. Is that accurate? Well, the Hebrew language has three ways to describe a young woman. Na'ara, which means a damsel, and can refer to either a virgin, like in 1 Kings 1:2, and I quote, "So his servants said to him, let them seek a young virgin for my lord the king, and let her attend to the king and become his nurse, and let her lie in your bosom, that my lord the king may keep warm." Or it can in close quote, it can also describe a non-virgin, like in Ruth 2, verse 6. And the servant in charge of the reapers answered and said, "She is a young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab." Close quote. Then the next word that can be translated as virgin is Bitula. This word is usually considered to mean a virgin exclusively. Actually, scholars have argued that if Isaiah wanted to say virgin for sure, he would have used Bitula. However, a further word study shows that the word does not always mean virgin only. For instance, in Joel 1:8, it refers to a widow. And I quote, "Well, like a virgin girded with sackcloth for the bridegroom of her youth." The bridegroom of her youth, that's not a virgin right there. But that's the way the word is used there. Or Genesis 24:16. The writer had to add a phrase, "had never known a man," to clarify the meaning of Bitula, as it refers to Rebekah, soon to become Isaac's wife. And I quote, "And the girl was very beautiful, a virgin, and no man had relation with her. And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up." So no man had relation with her had to be added to give the word the meaning of virgin. Again, in Judges 21:12, the writer had to add a phrase, "had never known a man," to clarify the meaning of Betula. And I quote, "And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man, by lying with him. And they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan." So it is clear from these passages that Bitula cannot dogmatically be used to describe a virgin. Well, let's now look at the third word, the word alma. This word means either a virgin, or a young virgin, or a virgin of marriageable age, like a younger woman. The word is used 7 times in the Tanakh, and it is never used to describe a married woman. So let's take a moment here and let's review the 7 instances. That's all of them that we can find in the Tanakh. Genesis 24:43, in contrast to 24:16 about Rebekah, and I quote 43, that one does not require qualifying words to describe a virgin. It is used of Rebekah, who was a virgin at the time of her marriage to Isaac, and it describes her as a maiden or a virgin. 24:43, "Behold, I am standing by the spring, and may it be that the maiden who comes out to draw, and to whom I say, please let me drink a little water from your jar." So right there, it's used differently. Then Exodus 2:8 is a reference to Moses' sister Miriam, who was a virgin. And I quote, "Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Go ahead.' So the girl went and called the child's mother." The word is also used in Psalm 68:25. It is used in reference to the royal procession of virgins. The king is a reference to God himself, and it is highly unlikely that God would allow unchaste, unmarried women in his procession. That's in Psalm 68:25. And I quote, "The singers went on, the musicians after them, in the midst of the maidens," the almas, "beating tambourines." Then in Song of Solomon 1:3, in the context of purity within marriage, and I quote Song of Solomon 1:3, "Your oils have a pleasing fragrance, your name is like purified oil, therefore the maidens love you." Then again in Song of Solomon 6, verse 8, the word is used in contrast to wives and concubines, who obviously are not virgins. Wives and concubines are not virgins. Song of Solomon 6:8, and I quote, "There are 60 queens and 80 concubines and maidens, almas, without number." Then one more is in Proverbs 30, verses 18 and 19. The word is used in contrast to an adulteress. Proverbs 30, 18 and 19. And I quote, "There are three things which are too wonderful for me, four which I do not understand: the way of an eagle in the sky, the way of a serpent on a rock, the way of a ship in the middle of the sea, and the way of a man with an alma," with a maid. Finally, the passage that is discussed today, Isaiah 7:14. Why assume it is not virgin, where all the other instances of the word alma everywhere else in the Jewish scriptures have the meaning of virgin? Isaiah 7:14. "Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a alma, a virgin, will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel." As a matter of fact, the argument did not even exist among ancient Jewish writers. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation that 70 rabbis gathered together and worked on that translation, came up with a Greek translation of the Tanakh. It's about 200 BC. That translation never argues with the meaning. And they actually translated the word alma into parthenos, clearly only meaning virgin in Greek. No questions asked. See, these writers lived much closer to the days of Isaiah, as well as 200 years before the birth of Messiah. So the messiahship of Yeshua was not an issue with the Jewish community at that time. It seems to be pretty clear that alma means virgin. Now, let's look at the greater context of the passage to understand the double prophecy, the two prophecies here. Isaiah 7:13 through 17 again. To understand the context, we need to look at the historical background for this passage, starting at the beginning of Isaiah 7. The first couple of verses of Isaiah 7:1 and 2, the threat to the house of David. The Assyrian Empire is on the rise at this time of history, which is threatening, very threatening, to the smaller kingdoms of the Middle East, such as Aram, which is modern-day Syria, the northern kingdom of Israel, as well as the southern kingdom of Judah. Syria and Israel have decided to join forces against their common enemy. They still are not strong enough. And they invite Judah to join, and King Jehaz of Judah refuses to join. Israel and Syria decide to conspire against Judah to dethrone Ahaz and depose the entire house of David. Depose the entire house of David. The purpose is to establish a new dynasty more in favor of the alliance against the Assyrians. Here's the problem. This is a direct attack against the Davidic dynasty eternally established by God and promised by God in 2 Samuel 7:12 through 16. And it is doomed to failure just because of that. Listen to this, 2 Samuel 7:12 through 16. "When your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your descendant after you, who will come forth from you, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me. When he commits iniquity, I will correct him with the rod of men and the strokes of the sons of men, but my loving kindness shall not depart from him. As I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom shall endure before me forever. Your throne shall be established forever." Those are God's words, the promise of the Davidic dynasty. So this is doomed to failure. The Davidic dynasty will never cease. Next is a message to Jehaz in Isaiah 7:3 through 9. King Jehaz is an idol worshiper, and he's terrified of the possible outcome of a conflict with the other two kingdoms. In verse 3, Isaiah is sent by God to meet with Ahaz. And actually, Ahaz takes his son, Shear-Yashuv, with him. This will play a part later in the passage. In verse 4 through 6, Isaiah tells Ahaz not to worry about being overthrown, as it won't happen. Again, because of God's promise in the Davidic covenant, the plot to dethrone Ahaz cannot succeed. That's if you trust the Bible, that's if you trust God to keep his promise. But Ahaz did not. So the sign of deliverance is found in verses 10 through 17 of chapter 7. 10 and 11, there's a sign being offered, the offer of a sign. Isaiah 7, 10 through 11. Ahaz has greater faith in the Assyrian Empire than in the God of Israel. God speaks a second time this time, offering a sign, as deep as Sheol and as high as heaven. This is equivalent to God saying to Ahaz, pick a sign, any sign, the sky is the limit. Ahaz has a sign to ask a sign from God to be convinced that he can trust him about the doomed failure of the Assyrians. Then comes the rejection of the offer. Oh, and in verse 12, all of a sudden Ahaz becomes very spiritual and tells God he does not want to tempt him. This is a misapplied reference to Deuteronomy 6:16, where we are warned not to ask God for a sign. Here God offered a sign to Ahaz, but Ahaz does not want a sign because he does not want to put an end to his alliance with Assyria. Deuteronomy 6:16, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test, as you tested him at Massah. We continue with the passage, and then there's a switch. 7, 13, and 14 is the sign to the house of David. All of a sudden, Isaiah now stops addressing Ahaz in particular and turns to the entire house of David. How do we know that? Well, the English language does not do justice to the singular and plural usages of the word you throughout the passage. It is in the singular in verse 9, 11, 16, and 17, but in the plural in verse 13 and 14, in the middle of the passage. It's like saying you and all of a sudden saying you all, and then going back to you. It's very, very different. Additionally, the word behold in the Hebrew is a word that is drawing attention to an event. And in this grammatical context, it is speaking of a future event, a future birth, and a future conception. I should say future conception and future birth. The text here in the Hebrew says ha'alma, the virgin, and not a virgin. In looking for a reference in the immediate context, we don't find any, so we must look at a possible previous reference. And of course, we have to go back all the way to Genesis to find that reference in Genesis 3:15 with the first Messianic prophecy, the one of the seed of the woman. Messiah is to be reckoned after the seed of the woman because he would not have a human father. His conception would be a virgin one from the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. Here God is promising that the house of David will not be deposed or lose its identity until the birth of a virgin-born son. This requires that Messiah be born before the destruction of the temple in AD 70. And finally, the sign to Ahaz in 7:15 through 17. Now that we know that 7:14 is a long-term prophecy to happen 700 years down the road, we must address the short-term sign to Ahaz. Remember, there's two prophecies in this passage. The you in verse 16 is again in the singular. You all, and then you. We're back to you, meaning Ahaz. Before Isaiah's son is old enough to know right from wrong, the kings of Israel will no longer be a threat to Ahaz. This is why Isaiah brought a son. This was fulfilled within 3 years. Isaiah uses a definite article before boy, making it the boy, but this time it refers to Shear Yeshuv, Isaiah's son. This is exactly why Isaiah was commanded to bring his son, to bring him along, because he was going to use them for to share the short-term prophecy. So in conclusion, the two signs found in this prophecy are: one, the promise to the house of David to be preserved until the birth of a virgin conceived son, Messiah himself, Yeshua. That long-term prophecy promise served as an encouragement to the house of David, who would go through 700 years before its fulfillment. That's a long time. And then you have the other prophecy within the same passage, the promise that he has personally, that the threatening kings of Israel will no longer be a problem within a very short period of time. Shear Yeshuv was still nursing when his dad brought him with him. Within 2 years, the short-term prophecy was fulfilled, which also served to validate Isaiah's prophetic office. So what can we get from that? At least two things. Messiah will be born of a virgin, which is the further development of Genesis 3:15, and Messiah will be born before the destruction of the temple in AD 70, which disqualifies any other Jewish person claiming to be the Messiah after that date. That's all I have for you. Remember to subscribe if you enjoy the videos and the programs. Until next time, shalom and be blessed.